I am Samuel Carter, and this story begins on the day I buried my only son. If you have ever stood beside a coffin knowing that the world you built is collapsing beneath your feet, you will understand the silence that swallowed me whole that morning. Grief sat heavy in my chest, and every breath felt borrowed. Yet even in that silence, there were words spoken that carved deeper than the ache of loss itself. Ethan, my boy, my pride, had died in a sudden highway accident 2 months earlier. No warning, no last conversation, no chance to say the kind of goodbye every father hopes for. I arrived at the church early, wearing the same dark suit I had worn to my wife Claire's funeral years before. I stood near the entrance, hands clasped, greeting people who patted my shoulder and murmured empty comforts. Their voices passed over me like distant wind. The only thing I truly felt was the cold absence beside me where my son should have been standing. Then there was Lillian. My daughter-in-law moved through the room with a confidence that did not belong in a place of mourning. She wore a fitted black dress that must have cost more than my monthly groceries and heels that clicked sharply against the stone floor as if she were stepping onto a stage rather than into a farewell. As a financial advisor, she was used to directing conversations, controlling rooms, making decisions. Today, she treated the funeral as her latest project. She had personally chosen the casket, the flowers, the music, everything. When I gently asked if we could play a hymn Ethan and I used to listen to while fixing up the old house, she shut me down instantly. "That song is too somber, Samuel," she said briskly. "The guests need something uplifting." Uplifting? At my son's funeral. People noticed the way she spoke to me. They also noticed the way I kept lowering my gaze instead of confronting her. I suppose to them it looked like a man who had lost everything and could no longer stand tall. I heard someone whisper that poor Samuel is probably relying on her now. Ethan took care of everything. Without him, he's helpless. That assumption would follow me like a shadow. After the service, the crowd gathered at the house I built with my own hands long before Ethan was even born. It stood warm and familiar on a quiet street, filled with decades of memories of Claire and Ethan and the life we carved out together. But since Ethan's death, Lillian had treated it as though it were a property she had purchased, and not a home she had married into. Entering my own living room felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory. Pictures of Claire had vanished from the mantel. Ethan's childhood drawings had been removed from the hallway wall. Even the old armchair in the corner, the one Ethan used to curl into when he was 5, clutching his dinosaur toys, looked like an unwelcome guest in its own home. I stood quietly in that fading room, listening to guests offer condolences, watching Lillian glide among them, shaking hands, smiling as if she were the new head of the family. People gravitated toward her authority and barely glanced at me. Then it happened. I was standing near the kitchen doorway when Lillian walked up to me, her face perfectly composed even in her grief. She touched my elbow lightly, the way one might handle something fragile but inconvenient. "Samuel, we need to talk." Her voice carried enough force that nearby guests turned their heads. I nodded and followed her into the corner of the room. She inhaled slowly, then fixed me with a cold, steady look. "You need to stop crying and get yourself together. This isn't helping anyone." My throat tightened. I said nothing. She continued speaking as if discussing some business arrangement. "You know Ethan was supporting you. He covered your expenses, your property taxes, your utilities. Without him, I cannot manage all of that. You will need to pack your bags and find somewhere else to go." A murmur swept through the people behind us. Their eyes widened, but no one stepped forward. "You will leave this house within 30 days, she declared. "I cannot be burdened with this situation anymore." Burden. The word echoed inside me. The grief of losing my son was sharp, but this was a different pain, a quieter, deeper cut. I stood still, feeling the entire room watch as she dismissed me from the very home I had built board by board. I could hear whispers, "Poor Samuel, he really cannot manage anything on his own. She will have to take care of everything now." They believed her. Why wouldn't they? I wore simple clothes, drove an old truck, and lived modestly after losing Claire. It was easy for them to see me as weak. I looked at Lillian, her confidence gleaming like polished steel, and felt the humiliation settle into my bones. But beneath that quiet stillness, a different thought formed. She thinks she holds all the power. She thinks she knows everything, and she has no idea what she does not know. I simply nodded. I understand. Lillian interpreted my silence as surrender. But silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is preparation. And as I looked around that room, filled with people who believed her version of the truth, I knew this story was only beginning. In the days following the funeral, the house grew quieter, but not in the natural way a home settles after grief. It was the kind of quiet that comes when someone begins erasing a life, piece by piece. Lillian wasted no time. Barely a week had passed when she began pulling down framed photos of Claire from the hallway, claiming she was reorganizing to create a calmer atmosphere. Ethan's woodworking projects, which had sat proudly on the shelves for years, disappeared into cardboard boxes. Even the old family quilt draped over the back of the couch vanished overnight. Every memory that made this place a home was being removed under the guise of updating. The space felt hollow and unfamiliar, a museum she was renovating without understanding the meaning behind any exhibit. One morning I woke to a stack of documents placed neatly on the dining table. A printed timeline highlighted in red marked an eviction date, exactly 30 days from the funeral. There was no conversation, no discussion, no attempt at compassion, only a deadline and a short note at the top that read, "This is the most reasonable solution for both of us." I sat at the table reading it slowly, letting each sentence sink in like cold rain on exposed skin. She had already researched senior living facilities without ever asking what I could afford. Sunset Valley Senior Home starts at $800 a month, she had written. They offer small studio rooms suitable for someone in your situation. Those last two words stung harder than the rest. My situation. As though my entire existence could be summarized in a category for people without independence or means. Later that afternoon, she arrived in the house again, walking around with her phone held up as she recorded short videos for her coworkers. She spoke loudly, gesturing toward walls and furniture as if preparing a listing. "These cabinets will have to go," she said. "The style is outdated, and the floors will need refinishing. He never maintained them properly." I stood in the doorway listening. Those cabinets were the ones Claire chose the year Ethan turned 10. I had sanded and stained the floors myself every few years. But in her eyes, anything connected to the past was a flaw. Visitors who once saw me as a steady father and neighbor now regarded me with pity. I heard one neighbor whisper, "He must be lost without Ethan. He probably never saved a dime." Another responded softly, "Lillian is doing her best. She just can't carry him forever." Assumptions. People cling to them like anchors because it is easier than asking questions. I kept quiet and let the days pass. I moved through the house like a shadow as Lillian continued rearranging my life. She placed sticky notes on furniture, marking items she planned to donate. She measured rooms with a tape measure, calculating renovation budgets as if my consent were irrelevant. She even told visitors that I was too fragile to handle paperwork, that Ethan managed everything for me. Soon those visitors began offering unsolicited advice on financial assistance programs intended for seniors without resources. The pity in their eyes cut deeper than anger ever could. But I did not correct them. I let them build their own narrative because I suspected that eventually every assumption would come crashing down. Sometimes letting someone believe a lie tells you more about them than telling the truth ever could. One evening, Lillian approached me with a stack of brochures in her hand. "I found these places for you," she said, handing them over as if giving me a gift. "They offer meals 3 times a day and basic medical support. They are affordable for someone with your income." She paused. "Assuming you even have consistent income." Her voice held no malice, no empathy, only certainty. She believed every word she said because she had already decided who I was. A dependent old man, a responsibility, a burden. She spoke about Ethan as if he had been financing my life while building their future. She claimed he covered my taxes, my repairs, my bills. She insisted I would not last a month living alone without her guidance. What struck me most was her confidence. Not arrogance exactly, but a calm assurance that she was the only adult left in the room. She spoke with the tone of someone who had already taken ownership in her mind. But what she did not know, and what she never bothered to ask, was simple. Ethan never told her anything about my finances. Not because he hid it from her, but because he never knew the details himself. He grew up comfortable because I worked hard and saved harder. I never needed help from him, but I did accept his company when he offered it. He picked up groceries not because I lacked money, but because he wanted to help after Claire died. He drove me to appointments because he wanted to spend time with me, not because I was incapable. Lillian saw these gestures and built an entire story around them. A story where she was the savior, gently supporting an aging, dependent father-in-law. And the people around her accepted that version without question, because it fit their expectations more neatly than the truth. As the days passed, she grew bolder. She spoke openly to her friends in the house, referring to future projects for my home. She priced out kitchen upgrades, discussed replacing furniture, and talked about removing everything that did not match her vision. She truly believed she had inherited a kingdom. I watched and waited, not out of hesitation but out of clarity. Silence can be a powerful teacher, and people reveal their true nature when they think no one is paying attention. Each time I saw her toss away another piece of the life Claire and I had built, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sorrow, something sharper, something steadier, a decision taking shape. She had given me 30 days. But she had no idea what those 30 days would bring. The storm was gathering, and she was walking straight into it without ever looking up. 2 weeks after the funeral, I woke before dawn, unable to sleep. The house felt different in the early morning quiet, not peaceful, hollow, as though it were waiting for something to happen. I walked slowly through the hallway, touching the empty places on the walls where photographs once hung. Claire and Ethan had smiled down this hallway for decades. Now it looked like a corridor in a vacant rental, stripped of its soul. Maybe that is what pushed me toward the storage room, or maybe it was simply time. The door creaked softly when I opened it. The familiar scent of dust, old paper, and cold concrete drifted out to greet me. I switched on the small lamp sitting on the workbench, and its yellow light revealed the steel filing cabinet tucked into the corner. Claire used to laugh at that cabinet. She said it made our storage room look like a detective's archive. She never understood why I kept every receipt, every tax form, every deed, every insurance paper. I am not sure I understood it either. It was simply my way of protecting the life we were building. When you grow up with nothing, you learn to keep proof of everything you earn. The cabinet was still locked. My hands remembered the combination without hesitation. The click of the mechanism echoed softly, and I pulled the drawer open. There they were, 40 years of our lives filed neatly in pale manila folders. I reached for the oldest folder, labeled Land Purchase and Building Contracts. The paper inside crackled gently when I unfolded it. The numbers, the signatures, the dates, they all sat exactly where I had left them. I could almost hear the voice of the man who sold me the land decades ago. He had said, "This place will hold if you build it right." And I had. There was the deed, dated long before Lillian was even born. There were the construction receipts, the utility activation documents, the early tax statements, all of them in my name. No joint ownership, no transfers, no liens, no mortgage, nothing connecting Ethan to legal ownership, and certainly nothing connecting Lillian. I placed the papers aside and opened the next drawer. The 90s, then the 2000s, then the years after Claire's passing. Every record consistent, every payment made from my accounts. No trace of dependency anywhere. But the real truth rested in the bottom drawer. Trust documents private. My hand hovered over the folder for a moment. Even I had almost forgotten about this. When Ethan was still a child, Claire and I created a family trust, thinking ahead to protect the home and our savings from unexpected circumstances. It was something we never talked about because life was simple back then. We saved quietly, we lived modestly, and we believed the future would take care of itself. I opened the folder. Inside lay the trust agreement, thick, detailed, stamped, signed. My name and Claire's name as trustees, no one else. And then the beneficiary section. Ethan's name, not as an inheritor, as a lifetime beneficiary. That meant the trust provided for him, supported him, helped him with education, housing, and emergencies. Lillian had believed Ethan paid my bills. But the money flowing from Ethan to me was money that had always originated from me, flowing outward through the trust as support for him. Then, the first twist revealed itself. I found the updated bank statement for the trust. The balance stared back at me. A number substantial enough to raise eyebrows in any bank office. A number Lillian had no idea existed. And then the insurance document. The life insurance policy Ethan had through his job. The one Lillian had already planned to spend. The one she spoke about vaguely as her safety net. Beneficiary. The Carter Family Trust. Not Lillian. Not a spouse. The trust. And since I was the sole surviving trustee, that meant the funds belonged to me to manage for the purpose of family stability. Not hers. Not even partially. I leaned back slowly, letting the weight of that realization sink in. Lillian had been speaking boldly about her future plans, relying on assets that were never legally hers and never would be. She had threatened to evict me from my own home while counting money she had zero claim to. She was standing on a foundation of assumptions, and every one of them was crumbling beneath her feet. But what unsettled me most was not her arrogance. It was her certainty. How confidently she had rewritten the story in her own mind. She believed Ethan owned this house because she needed to believe it. She believed he supported me because it made her feel powerful. She believed she had inherited a life of security because she never imagined a world where her husband had no legal claim to the home he grew up in. People see what they want to see when the truth might inconvenience them. I closed the folder carefully and returned it to the drawer. As I pushed the cabinet shut, the metal door echoed like a distant warning bell. I stood in the room watching the shadows stretch across the floor as morning light crept in under the door. With every second growing brighter, I understood something with painful clarity. The humiliation at the funeral, the eviction notice, the dismissive tone, the assumptions, they were not accidents or grief-driven missteps. They were choices. Actions taken with the confidence of someone who believed she had won before the game even started. But she had not seen the board. She had not seen the rules. She had not seen the truth she was building her entire future upon. A future she had absolutely no right to. For the first time since Ethan's death, a spark of resolve awakened in me. It was not anger, not revenge, something deeper, something older, something that comes from decades of building a life with your bare hands. Respect must be mutual, boundaries must be clear, and truth must be spoken when the time demands it. The time was coming, very soon. When I walked back upstairs, carrying only one sheet of paper, the original deed to the house I built, I felt an unusual calm settle over me. She gave me 30 days. She would regret choosing that number. The day of the first real confrontation began like any other. A quiet, gray morning. The kind of light that slips into a home and makes every corner look softer, calmer than it really is. I had just finished washing my breakfast dishes when I heard voices outside. Confident voices, female voices, ones that did not belong to this house. When I opened the front door, Lillian was already unlocking it with Ethan's old key, walking in as though she were stepping into her office. Behind her followed two women wearing polished coats, glossy hair styled perfectly, tablets in hand, renovation consultants, or at least, that is what they presented themselves as. "Good morning, Samuel," she said without turning toward me, as if announcing her presence was a courtesy I should be grateful for. "We are doing an initial walkthrough today." Initial what? She ignored the question and led the two women into the living room, her heels tapping sharply over the wood floors. I refinished with my own hands, decades ago. "Please note the wall structure," she told them, gesturing dramatically. "We will need to remove this entire section. Open concept is essential for future resale value." The brunette consultant nodded while tapping notes into her tablet. "What about the flooring?" she asked. "Original," Lillian said with exaggerated disdain. "He never kept up with proper maintenance. We will need full replacement." I stepped into the room slowly. Everything inside me tightened, but not with anger, with clarity. It was the same clarity I felt the day I found the trust folder, the kind that sharpens rather than shakes you. The blonde consultant glanced at me politely. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. Lillian told us you are transitioning out soon, so we want to handle this in a way that makes the process comfortable for you." Transitioning. Comfortable. As if I were an old armchair being relocated. "Is that so?" I asked calmly. Lillian finally faced me. "Yes, Samuel. These women will help me bring the house to its full potential once you have moved into your new facility." Facility. She said the word with such confident certainty, as though speaking it made it real. I walked to the center of the room. I could feel all 3 pairs of eyes watching me, expecting me to shrink back into the background like I had at the funeral. Instead, I straightened my shoulders. "Lillian," I said quietly, "does this house look neglected to you?" She forced a smile. "Samuel, you are taking this too personally. The condition of the property needs modernization. Ethan and I always talked about updating this place. He told me he handled all your bills because you could not maintain it anymore." My jaw tightened. "Ethan told you that?" "Yes." She said it quickly. Too quickly. He paid the taxes, the utilities, the repairs, everything. I stepped closer. "Did you ever see a tax statement with his name on it?" Her face shifted, barely but enough for the consultants to notice. "He handled things online," she said. "You know how modern systems work." I nodded slowly. "Did you ever see a single receipt? A utility bill? A bank transfer? Anything?" The brunette consultant's eyes widened slightly. Silence settled across the room. Lillian swallowed. "That is not the point." "It is exactly the point." Her composure cracked for the first time. She tightened her grip on her tablet and spoke without looking at me. "Samuel, you cannot keep pretending everything is fine. You cannot afford to live here. You never could. Ethan helped you for years. You should be grateful for that." "Grateful for what?" I asked with a quietness sharper than shouting. "For letting you rewrite my life in this home? Or for letting you assume that silence means weakness?" The blonde consultant stepped back, sensing lightning in the air. Lillian lifted her chin. "You can deny it all you want. This house belongs to me now. David left it to me. That is what spouses do, Samuel. They inherit. This house is my future. You are not." I let the words settle not in anger but in purpose. "Lillian," I said, my voice steady, "allow me to ask one more question." "What now?" she snapped. "Did you see the deed?" The room froze as if someone had cut the air in half. Her lips parted slightly, just enough for the fear behind her eyes to flicker. "I do not need to see the deed," she said. "I know what Ethan told me. I know how inheritance works. I know." "No, you assumed. That is very different." The consultants exchanged a look, the universal look of professionals sensing they were witnessing something they should not be present for. Maybe we should come back at another time," the brunette said awkwardly. "No," Lillian said firmly, her pride catching fire. "We will finish this walkthrough." But her voice shook ever so slightly. I stepped forward slowly, deliberately, and spoke softly to the consultants. "Ladies, before you recommend tearing down walls, you might ask your client to show you proof she owns the property." Lillian whipped around. "Samuel, do not start this." "I already have." I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I simply told the truth, wrapped in calmness so cold it made her flinch. I walked toward the doorway. "Enjoy your tour," I said. "When you are finished, I would like to speak with you privately, Lillian, preferably with facts this time." She stared at me, her polished composure now fractured, a single crack running across her expression. She knew something in the room had shifted, and she no longer controlled it. I left her standing there, surrounded by the consultants whose trust in her expertise was already dissolving. As I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me, the morning air felt lighter, not because the conflict was ending, but because it was finally beginning in the right direction. She wanted me out in 30 days. But she had no idea that within the same 30 days, her world would collapse inward, not from anything I did, but from the truth she had refused to face. The morning after the confrontation with the renovation consultants, the sky hung low and heavy, as though the air itself understood something was shifting. I dressed quietly, put on my old coat, and drove into town. The roads were nearly empty, which suited me. I needed the silence to steady myself for what came next. The law office sat in a modest brick building, tucked between a bakery and an insurance agency. Nothing grand, nothing loud. The kind of place where the truth is handled with precision instead of theatrics. As soon as I stepped inside, the receptionist looked up and smiled warmly. Good morning, Mr. Carter. Ms. Wright is expecting you. I nodded, feeling that familiar mixture of grief and determination settle into my bones. Eleanor Wright had been my attorney for more than 15 years. She was a calm woman with sharp eyes and a mind that cut through confusion like a scalpel. When I entered her office, she stood to greet me. "Samuel," she said gently, placing a hand on my arm, "I am sorry for your loss." I nodded, unable to say much more than that. The loss still lived on my tongue like a bitter taste. But today was not about grief. Today was about clarity. I set the 3 manila folders on her desk and took a seat. "Is everything in here?" Eleanor asked. "Everything," I replied. "Deeds, taxes, the trust, the insurance." She adjusted her glasses and opened the first folder. The deed lay on top, crisp, explicit, undeniable. "Recorded in your name alone," she said. "No transfers, no co-owners, no liens, and no sign Ethan ever held title." "Correct." She moved to the next section. 37 years of tax statements, all paid from your accounts." "Correct." "Utilities, contracts, insurance records, renovation receipts, all your name." "Correct." When she finished reviewing the first folder, she leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen thoughtfully against the desk. "Samuel, this is airtight. There is no scenario in which your daughter-in-law has any legal claim to the property. None." I nodded, but I felt no triumph. This was not about winning. This was about restoring truth. Eleanor opened the second folder, trust documents. Her eyes flicked across the lines quickly but carefully, as she always did. "This is a substantial trust, Samuel," she said. "I do not think even Ethan understood the extent of it." "He did not," I replied softly. "I only wanted him to live without worry." Eleanor smiled faintly. "You provided him security. That is what a father does." Then she reached the third document, the insurance policy. And the moment she saw the beneficiary line, she nodded slowly. "So this is the part she does not know." "No," I replied. "She thinks she inherited it." Eleanor exhaled. "And yet the money belongs to the trust, meaning that as trustee, you are the legal recipient of the funds. She has no standing to access it." "Correct." She glanced up at me sharply. "Samuel? What was she planning?" "Exactly." I sighed. "Renovations, new investments, maybe even buying a second property." She already told people that Ethan supported me financially and that she was taking over everything he paid for. Eleanor set the papers down slowly. "And she truly believes that?" "Yes." Then Eleanor gave the smallest, incredulous laugh. "Well, she is in for a rather unpleasant surprise." I sat quietly for a moment before saying, "Eleanor, I want to handle this carefully." "Carefully how?" "I do not want shouting or drama. I do not want revenge. I want clarity. For her, for everyone who heard her humiliate me." Eleanor waited. She always waited when something important hovered beneath my words. "I want this to be public," I said finally. "Not the world, not strangers, just the same people she lied to, the ones she misled at her office, the ones who believed her because she spoke confidently while I stayed quiet." Eleanor nodded. "So the goal is not punishment, it is correction." "Yes, correction and boundaries." She considered this for a long moment. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a clean pad of paper. "We will need to serve her formal notice, 30 days to vacate." "The same timeline she gave me," I said. "There is symmetry in that," Eleanor replied with a small smile. "We will also need to present the trust structure and the insurance designation clearly, and given her behavior, witnesses will be wise." "Yes, witnesses." "Now comes the second twist," Eleanor said as she reached for her laptop. She opened her email and clicked on a message. "This came in yesterday afternoon." She turned the screen toward me. It was from the insurance company. Lillian Carter attempted to claim Ethan Carter's life insurance funds. Claim denied. My heart tightened. She tried? Yes, already, only a week after the funeral, and the company rejected it immediately because the trust is the sole beneficiary. They contacted me, since I am listed as your legal counsel. I stared at the screen, feeling a quiet coldness gather behind my ribs. Not anger, not betrayal, just confirmation. She had not even waited for clarity. She had acted out of pure assumption and entitlement. Eleanor closed the laptop. "Samuel," she said gently, "this is more than her misunderstanding the law. This is deliberate. She thought she could take control before you even had time to breathe." "I know," I said. She folded her hands on the desk. "Then let us make something absolutely clear to her." "When do we confront her?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," Eleanor replied. 10 o'clock, at her office, where her colleagues can witness the truth, presented simply and calmly. "Good. Samuel," she added, looking at me with a softness that surprised me. "Are you ready for this?" I took a long, steady breath. I have spent 2 months being spoken to like a child. 2 months being treated as elderly debris to be swept out of the way. 2 months letting everyone believe I depended on Ethan. Eleanor nodded. "But I built my life with honest work and careful planning," I continued. "And I will not let anyone rewrite that story because it makes them feel powerful." "Then you are ready," she said. I stood and shook her hand. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything." As I walked out of the office, the sun broke through the clouds, casting long rays across the sidewalk. For the first time in weeks, the light did not feel harsh. It felt like something was shifting back into place, like the world was preparing for balance to return. Tomorrow would not be pleasant for Lillian, but it would be honest. And sometimes, honesty is the strongest storm a person can face. The next morning arrived with a sharp, almost metallic chill in the air. It was the kind of cold that wakes you fully the moment you step outside, the kind that carries a warning. I dressed carefully, choosing a clean shirt, a dark coat, and the quiet resolve that had been building inside me for weeks. At exactly 9:30, I drove to Lillian's real estate office. I did not rush. I did not hesitate. Truth has its own timing. When I reached the office, Eleanor Wright was waiting in front, standing tall and steady, a folder tucked beneath her arm. She greeted me with a nod. "Are you prepared, Samuel?" "As prepared as a man can be when he is about to walk into a room full of people who believe a lie," I said. "Then let us give them the truth." We walked in together. The office was bright and modern, all glass partitions and polished floors. A large map pinned with property listings filled one wall. Phones rang softly in the background. It looked like a place where confidence thrived, and reputation meant everything. Lillian was sitting at her desk with a young couple across from her, probably first-time buyers from the hopeful look on their faces. She was mid-sentence when she saw us. Her smile froze, her eyes widened, and the color drained from her face. "Samuel," she said, her voice tightening, "what are you doing here?" Before I could respond, Eleanor stepped forward. "Good morning. I am Eleanor Wright, attorney at law. We are here to discuss urgent legal matters regarding your late husband's estate." The young couple exchanged glances. The man stood up immediately. "We can come back later," he said. "Yes, we will reschedule," the woman added, already gathering her purse. Lillian held up a hand as if she could block the inevitable. "Wait, you do not need to." But they were already gone. The office had gone still. Conversations quieted. Several agents lifted their heads, their eyes darting between us and Lillian. The 3 consultants from the house walkthrough were seated at a cluster of desks nearby. They watched intently, remembering what they had witnessed days earlier. Lillian forced a smile. "Samuel, we could have handled this privately." Eleanor opened her folder. "No, we could not. You have made public claims about ownership, finances, and responsibilities. We are here to correct those claims with documentation." Lillian's jaw clenched. She looked around the office. Her colleagues leaned in subtly, pretending to read emails while obviously listening. "Let us begin," Eleanor said calmly. She placed the first document on the center of Lillian's desk. "This is the deed to the Carter home, purchased by Mr. Carter several decades ago, paid in full, no co-owners, no transfers, no joint title with Ethan Carter." Lillian shook her head slowly. "That cannot be right," Ethan told me. Eleanor cut her off gently but firmly. "You made assumptions. Please note the official recording date and the legal description. This is notarized and backed by 37 consecutive years of property tax payments, made solely by Mr. Carter. The blonde consultant from before whispered under her breath, 37 years? Lillian's eyes flickered toward her colleagues, panic beginning to crack through the polished facade. Eleanor continued placing more papers on the desk. Here are the tax records, all paid by Mr. Carter. Here are the utility documents, all in his name. Here are the insurance renewals, all handled by him. Each document landed like a stone in the silence. Lillian looked helplessly from page to page. This does not make sense. Ethan always said he helped you with groceries, I said quietly. He helped with groceries, and he liked fixing the gutter in spring. It made him feel useful. But the finances? He did not handle those. Lillian blinked rapidly. But he told me he was paying the taxes. Eleanor shook her head. No, he did not. And that is evident from the paperwork. A male agent standing by the photocopier muttered, "Wow." Lillian straightened, as if trying to salvage control. Even if that is true, the insurance money is mine. He was my husband. Eleanor opened the third folder. Here is the life insurance policy. Beneficiary, the Carter Family Trust, which means that the funds are legally designated to the trust, and Mr. Carter is the sole surviving trustee. The office dropped into pin-drop silence. Lillian's throat worked as she tried to speak. That cannot be. I already applied for that. They just have not processed. Eleanor slid another document forward. They denied your claim because you are not the beneficiary. A flush crept up Lillian's neck, her hands trembling slightly as she realized every safety net she had imagined was gone. A voice from a nearby desk broke the silence. You claimed the house was yours, Lillian. Another voice joined. You said you inherited everything. I felt no triumph in that moment, only the deep, steady sadness that comes when truth finally steps out of the shadows. Eleanor closed her folder quietly. Given the misinformation spread publicly, we felt it necessary to address the matter in front of appropriate witnesses. Mr. Carter is serving you with official notice. You have 30 days to vacate the property. Lillian inhaled sharply. 30 days? That is impossible. I do not have. One of her co-workers shifted uncomfortably. Do you need a moment, Lillian? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The confidence she once wielded so effortlessly had slipped through her fingers like sand. I stepped forward for the first time. Lillian, I said softly, you did not ask questions. You chose to assume. You chose to humiliate me in front of others. But the truth was always here. You simply never looked for it. Her eyes filled with something I had never seen from her before. Vulnerability. Samuel, I made mistakes. Yes, I said gently. You made choices. Eleanor nodded toward the exit. We will allow you some privacy now. As we walked out of the office, I felt dozens of eyes following us, not judging me, but reevaluating Lillian, reevaluating everything she had ever claimed. Outside, the sun had risen higher, clearer, warmer than the day before. Eleanor turned to me. It is done. No, I said quietly. It has only just begun. Inside that office, her reputation was already dissolving. Clients would ask questions. Colleagues would talk. Rumors would spread. Not because I spoke badly of her, but because truth carries its own echo. And that echo was already louder than anything Lillian had ever said. In the days that followed the confrontation at the real estate office, a strange calm settled over my life. It was the kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from aftermath, like the quiet that lingers after a storm has torn through a valley. The truth was out in the open now. Nothing more needed to be said. People would draw their own conclusions, and I suspected most of them already had. By Monday morning, the town's professional circles were buzzing. I knew because my neighbor, Mrs. Alden, knocked on my door with a steaming mug of tea and more information than any newspaper could offer. Samuel, she whispered, settling into one of the kitchen chairs as though hiding from someone. Do you know what happened yesterday? I shook my head. I had not left the house. I did not need to. The world had a way of walking to my doorstep. 3 clients dropped their contracts with her, she said softly. 3. They asked to switch to other agents because they said they needed someone who understands property law. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, not because I felt responsible, but because I understood the weight of her words. Reputation is a fragile thing in that field. Once cracked, it spreads. Mrs. Alden continued, and her broker called her in for a meeting. That was Sunday evening. Apparently people are asking if she knowingly misled them. You know how gossip travels. I nodded. Yes, I knew. Later that afternoon, as I sat on the back porch drinking coffee, a familiar knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, I found James Hart, one of Ethan's close friends from college, standing on the step. He carried a small envelope in his hand and an expression that looked halfway between guilt and concern. "James, it's good to see you," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I should have come sooner. I just wasn't sure how to face you. May I come in?" "Of course." He stepped inside quietly, as though entering a sacred space. We sat in the living room, the one Lillian once declared outdated and inefficient. Today it felt exactly as it should, still, familiar, honest. James looked down at the envelope in his hands before finally speaking. "Samuel, I want to apologize. We all believed her. Everything Lillian said about you, that Ethan was supporting you, that you had no savings, that she was taking care of everything. We didn't question it. People see what they're shown," I said gently. He nodded slowly. "But Ethan, he told me something once, something I didn't understand until now." I leaned forward. "What did he say?" James hesitated for a moment, then took a breath. "He told me he was worried about Lillian's attitude toward you. He said she didn't appreciate what you had built. He said he wanted to talk to her about boundaries after their anniversary trip. But then—" He stopped there. He didn't have to finish. The accident happened before Ethan had the chance to speak for me, before he could protect what I had spent a lifetime building. A quiet ache tightened in my chest. Not grief, exactly, but a new understanding of my son. He had seen more than I realized. He had planned to set things right. James placed the envelope on the coffee table. "Ethan wanted you to have this. He wrote it last year, before things got tense between them. I think he knew you'd need it someday." I stared at the envelope long after James left. My hands did not tremble when I opened it. Inside was a short, handwritten letter, Ethan's unmistakable handwriting looping across the page. "Dad, if anything ever happens to me, please remember this. You are not a burden. You never were. You took care of me my whole life, even when I was too proud to admit it. I know Lillian doesn't always see it, but I do. Everything I have is because you taught me how to be a man who works hard and gives more than he takes. If she ever forgets that, I hope life reminds her. Love, Ethan." I sat back, the letter resting in my hands. For the first time since his death, I let my tears fall without hiding them. That evening, Lillian's attorney contacted Eleanor. She relayed the message to me by phone. "Her attorney says she wants to stay longer," Eleanor said. "She's asking for a 6-month extension." "On what grounds?" "Compassion, supposedly. She says she's overwhelmed and financially strained." I exhaled. "And the rent offer?" $2,000 a month. I almost smiled. $2,000 for a house with a fair market rent of at least $3,500. She wanted sympathy pricing after showing me none. "What do you want to set?" Eleanor asked. "Market rate. First month, last month, and a security deposit." "So $10,500 up front?" "Yes," I replied. "If she wants the home that badly, she can treat it like any other property. No discount for cruelty." Eleanor paused. "She won't be able to afford that. Then she will need to leave." The next morning, the attorney called back. Lillian would be moving out. The consequences unfolded quickly after that. By the end of the week, she had been asked to take a leave of absence from her firm. Too many clients had expressed concern. Too many colleagues had witnessed her collapse. Too many rumors had spread about her misunderstanding of property law. Her confidence, once a polished shield, had cracked entirely. Meanwhile, I returned to a quieter routine. I walked the neighborhood again, and for the first time in weeks, people approached me not with pity, but with apologies. "I'm sorry for believing what I heard," one neighbor said. "I'm sorry I didn't check on you," Another added. I accepted every apology with softness. Anger accomplishes nothing at my age. Understanding, however, can shift an entire world. Each night I sat in the living room with Ethan's letter on the table beside me. The words in that letter did more to heal me than anything else I had experienced in months. They reminded me that my son knew my worth long before anyone needed proof. They reminded me that respect cannot be erased by gossip or assumptions. But the greatest restoration came slowly, quietly, in the simplest way, in reclaiming my home. Every photo I rehung, every object I returned to its place, every memory I dusted off. It was not the house that needed restoring. It was my sense of belonging within it. By the end of the week, I felt something settle within me, a truth solid as bedrock. Silence had protected Lillian for months, but truth had revealed her. And truth, once spoken, has consequences. 3 weeks after the confrontation at her office, the house felt like itself again. The photographs of Claire were back on the walls. The quilt she stitched in her late 20s rested across the back of the sofa, and the small carved wooden box Ethan made in high school sat exactly where it belonged. In the center of the living room shelf, quietly, slowly, the home was breathing again. I had just finished organizing some old tools in the garage when I heard a hesitant knock at the front door. Not the sharp, confident tapping Lillian always used. This was different, gentle, uncertain. When I opened the door, she stood there holding a cardboard box in her arms. Her hair was tied back, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep, and the once immaculate posture she carried herself with had softened. She looked smaller somehow, like a person who had been walking through storms with no umbrella. "Hello, Samuel," she said softly. "Lillian, may I come in?" For a moment, I considered turning her away, not out of spite, but out of a desire to protect the fragile peace I had rebuilt. But Ethan would not have closed the door on her. And I would not dishonor my son now. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. She walked inside slowly, as though entering a place she no longer recognized. Her gaze drifted over the restored family photos, the familiar furnishings, the warmth she once tried to erase. She set the cardboard box on the coffee table with care. "I found these while packing," she said quietly. "They belong to you." I lifted the lid. Inside were old photo albums, Claire's handwritten recipe cards, Ethan's first pair of baby shoes, and a sealed envelope addressed to Dad. My throat tightened. "Thank you," I said quietly. She nodded but kept her eyes on the floor. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The silence between us was not the cold one we had shared for months. This one was human, heavy, real. Finally she sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "Samuel, I owe you an apology." I sat in the armchair across from her but said nothing. I wanted her to find her own words. She took a breath, then began. "When Ethan died, I panicked. I felt the world slipping away from me. Financially, emotionally, everything. I depended on him more than I ever admitted. When he was gone, I latched onto what I thought I had left. The house, the money, the idea that I was in control." She swallowed hard. "And I thought you were part of the problem. I thought you were another responsibility, another weight. I did not see anything clearly. I did not want to." Her voice trembled. "But I was wrong. I told myself a story where I was the victim and you were the burden, and I believed it because it made everything easier for me." She covered her face with her hands for a moment and breathed shakily. "I hurt you deeply, and I am ashamed of it." There was a time when those words might have felt vindicating. They did not now. They simply felt necessary. I studied her quietly before speaking. "Lillian, grief reveals people. Sometimes it reveals the best. Sometimes it reveals the worst. And sometimes it reveals the truth about the places we need to grow." She lowered her hand slowly. "I understand that now. I need to grow, and I need to rebuild my life from the ground up. I have accepted a job offer in another city. I am leaving next week." A long silence passed between us, filled with the weight of months that had reshaped both our lives. Before she stood to leave, she looked at me one last time. "Samuel, if I had shown you respect from the beginning, If I had asked instead of assumed, if I had been kinder, would things have been different? I let the question linger. The truth mattered here. Not cruelty, not softness. Truth. Yes, I said quietly. Things would have been very different. We could have mourned Ethan together. We could have supported each other. We could have honored his memory instead of fighting over the pieces he left behind. Her eyes shimmered with unspoken regret. I am sorry, she whispered. I nodded. I know. She walked toward the door, then paused. Thank you for letting me say what I needed to say. Goodbye, Lillian. She left without another word, closing the door gently behind her. The house fell silent again, but not with emptiness, with release. I carried the box she brought into the living room and slowly examined its contents. Claire's recipes, Ethan's baby shoes, the envelope addressed to Dad. With careful hands, I opened it. Inside was a letter Ethan had written long before the accident. A letter that echoed the one James had given me. A letter that reminded me of everything I needed to hear. Dad, if you are reading this, life has probably taken a turn we never expected. I want you to know this. I learned everything good in me from you. My work ethic, my kindness, my patience. You are not weak. You are not in anyone's way. You built a life strong enough for all of us. If anyone ever forgets that, I hope you remind them. Love, Ethan. I closed the letter, pressing it gently to my chest. In the warmth of that moment, I understood something with complete clarity. Life is not about being loud or being powerful. It is about being honest. It is about standing quietly when others shout. It is about letting truth protect what pride never could. The house was peaceful again. My heart was steadier, and the lessons of the past months felt etched into the walls themselves. Respect is not inherited. It is not purchased. It is not claimed through volume or arrogance. Respect is earned through character. Assumptions are fragile. They collapse under the weight of truth. And the quietest person in the room is often the one holding the strongest foundation. As I placed Ethan's letter back into the box, I felt something inside me settle, like a final stone falling into its rightful place. This chapter of my life was closing. Not with anger, not with revenge, with understanding, with quiet, unshakable strength.